So I think the business is a little bit more important than his family members at this point.
All right. So that's who Mencho is. He's a main player. Talk about now the Sinaloa cartel. Who's in charge?
Well, it's been split into factions. Culiacan, like where I'm at, is principally controlled by Chapo's sons. But when you get out into the rest of Sinaloa, the majority is controlled by Mayo Zambala, who's been the traditional leader of the Sinaloa cartel. He's 74 years old now. But like I said, it's been split into factions. You have Chapo's sons, you have Mayo, and as well you have Chapo's brother, El Guano, who all control separate factions that are actually fighting in between each other in some places like Sonora, for example.
So the media has portrayed El Chapo as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Is that correct, or is that just a media portrayal and Mayo had the power?
Yeah, that's the media portrayal. That's why Chapo went to prison, and he's gone to prison several times. And Mayo's never been to prison a day in his life. Just like Mencho isn't the head of Cartel Jalisco. He's the scapegoat, just like Chapo was. The real head of Cartel Jalisco is a group called Los Ninis. And they were designated, by the American government as the richest cartel to have ever existed. But they play mostly in the shadows. And they're called Los Ninis, referring to a type of squirrel that lives in Jalisco that makes lots of babies because it's a family of like 15 or 13 brothers and sisters. So, and they're the actual power behind Cartel Jalisco, just like Mayo's the power behind the Sinaloa organization.
For the people joining the live stream, I'm talking to OG Shadow in Mexico, in Sinaloa. He's probably the bravest YouTuber I know. Several of his guests have been assassinated. He's had family members assassinated while he's been reporting on these things. He's had threats on his life. And he continues to report. All right, so Los Ninis Chapitza. Who are they?
Los Ninis means ni estudia ni trabaja, which is like don't work, don't study. And they're the security team loyal to Ivan Archibaldo, which is Chapo's son. And when we saw the Mexican government take on, or when we saw the cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, take on the Mexican government over the rest of Chapo's sons, that's who we were principally seeing operating was Los Ninis. They're headed by Nestor Isidro, who is El Nini. And yeah, the group's named after him.
So what's Los Chapitos?
Los Chapitos are Chapo's sons, also referred to as La Chapiza. Principally, there's four of them that are in control and actually operating, though it's headed by Ivan Archibaldo.
So how many kids did Chapo have?
There's something like 16 that are recognized, but people think it's a lot more than that. And there's four of them that are actually, like I said, in power. It was supposed to be Edgar, but Chapo accidentally killed that son when he was confused for El Huacho, who was somebody that was planning Chapo and Mayo's death and was actually driving the same color and make car as said Huacho that they were looking for. And the sicarios got him confused and ended up killing Chapo's son. His own sicarios did. I have a video actually there at the spot where they killed him on my other channel.
So when they accidentally killed Chapo's son, were there consequences for those guys, or was it understood that it was a mistaken identity thing?
It was understood, and the person who did it, Macho Prieto, was extremely powerful, and he was just following orders. They said this guy was there at this certain spot driving this certain car, so he just got the order and he followed the order. And there's actually a little marker, or you could say like a shrine to him, in the actual, it's like a Price Club parking lot, and it always gets decorated on his birthday, on Christmas. There's certain days where they dress it up differently, and if you'd like to see it on my channel, I go there for like 10 or 15 minutes, and not just anyone can film there. You have to get special permission to film there, because if they catch you without permission, they don't take it very friendly that you're filming, at Chapo's son's grave marker.
Got a question from JT. Is the CIA still tied to the cartels?
Of course. Of course, ever since the day of the Contras in Nicaragua, when they were using Caro Quintero's ranch to bring up white powder from Central America and to send down armed mercenaries, that were trained as well as armaments to the Contras fighting the communist, insurgency that was starting in Central America. So they have a long history. And that's why DE agent Kiki Camarena was killed, because he discovered the connection between the cartels and the CIA. Very high-ranking DE agent Mike Vigil, my respect to him, came out within the last couple of years and actually admitted that it was actually, the CIA that killed Kiki Camarena and all about their involvement. CIA agent Max Gomez is supposedly the one who actually is responsible for for Camarena's death.
Max Gomez, wasn't that the code name for one of Bush's cronies out of Cuba?
Yeah, he was related to Bush. There's been several links in between him and Bush.
All right. So just to make this for the viewers then who've seen Narcos Mexico, you saw the head of the cartel in Narcos Mexico, Felix Gallardo, and his sidekick, Caro Quintero. So Caro Quintero, that was based decades ago, but Caro Quintero, he did get released from prison a few years back, and now he's been rearrested. How was he apprehended, OG?
So they released him, but it was due to an error in judicial paperwork, and within 5 hours, there was already an arrest warrant generated for him. And he started the Caborca cartel, which is working out of Sonora, on the border at Caborca, but they've recently taken places like Guaymas and San Carlos and are actually responsible for a lot of the violence against American citizens. But they just arrested him a little bit ago, and the rumor on the street is it was his own nephew who turned him in for the $20 million award and to take his place inside the organization.
Wow. We just got a super chat question come in. So if people are, I'm trying to phrase this correctly for YouTube then. So bulk prices in Mexico go up and down for things. How much is a kilo of white these days? And what about green?
I don't really like to discuss prices of narcotics on my channel because it's kind of like indirectly promoting them or something like, but
okay, all right.
It's very cheap here,
Let's not go there then. I don't think it is a good idea. I think that was a good stop right
Yeah.
there, OG. Yeah, we can't be asking things like that. Just trying to keep the viewers' questions satisfied. All right. Have you seen the Mexico No Mercy video? That's from Macaw67.
No Mercy. No, I don't think I'm familiar with that one. Is that like an execution video or what? I don't know what that is. A No Mercy video.
Molky wants to know if El Chapo will ever be free in his lifetime again.
I really don't think so. I think the only way he's coming back to Mexico is inside a body bag.
Because the feds, the last big cartel leaders that were put away after Escobar, before Chapo, were the heads of the Cali cartel. So you had Miguel and you had Gilberto. Gilberto died earlier this year in the feds. Miguel, he's still got a little bit of time. But we've recently published Miguel's son's book, Son of the Cali Cartel. I'll have to send you a copy of that because it's a really fascinating story. He was the acting boss when his dad and his dad's brother went to the feds, but then he almost got assassinated himself, so he got out of the lifestyle. All right, so just going back to Chapo then. So are all of his kids united then against Mayo? Is that what's happening?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. They started the offensive by kicking Mayo's lieutenant El Russo out of Culiacan. And currently that fight has carried on, but into Sonora. In places like San Luis Rio Colorado, Mayo's lieutenant El Russo is fighting Chapo's sons pretty heavily, and also in Baja California and cities like Tijuana, they're also fighting in between Mayo and Chapo sons.
Who is Diego the car bomber who terrorized the Sinaloa cartel in Juarez?
Yeah, I just did a video on him today, actually, this morning. He worked for the Juarez cartel and was putting up car bombs and actually tried to frame the Sinaloa cartel and actually put up a car bomb in front of the United States consulate, and left two Sinaloa cartel members inside the car to make it look like it detonated prematurely. But due to the surveillance cameras that the embassy had, or the consulate, excuse me, they were able to see Diego actually had already left the bodies in their dead before he detonated the car bomb. So he kind of got caught and it didn't work. But he introduced his campaign of mass terror. And I was actually living in Juarez when that happened, and actually still working with organized crime when that happened. I lived in the streets Niños Héroes and Panama. And at that time, that's actually where all the violence in Mexico started, was in Juarez around that area of 2008. And Diego the car bomber was a brutal individual.
When you say is Diego the car bomber, was he assassinated?
He's in government custody. I think he's still alive. I haven't checked into it recently if he's still alive, but I'm pretty sure he's doing a life sentence, if I remember correctly, at least something like 40 years. Thank you, I do praise. I got love for you, brother. You've been subscribed a long time. You're looking out.
Big respect to Shadow. Is literally putting his life on the line speaking on this, and we can get more into his threats to his life later on. So the next question then is from JC. In your opinion, OG, what would be the best way of removing the cartel's power over the Mexican government?
You have to take away their money. So the only way to take away the cartel's power and grip is to legalize narcotics. Once you take away their source of income, they have no power to bribe or to control the government.
Good point.
I really do see that's the only way.
As someone who studies economics, you know, even the economist Milton Friedman warned George H.W. Bush this would all happen. But all they care about is running the drugs secretly and locking people up, making money out of them. All right, so Corton has asked, are you aware that the American Special Forces actually trained cartel founders who were in the Mexican military?
Yes, they weren't really cartel founders, but they trained members of the Zetas. The original Zetas, the real Zetas, were trained by American Special Forces. They were part of a group called Los Gafes. And I actually have a video from about 3 weeks ago. I hung out with Mexican Special Forces for a day, and they showed me all their weaponry and their camp and everything. So, you know, a lot of them are trained in the United States, and the ones that broke off actually caused them to rename the Special Forces because it kind of was disgraced by members of the Zetas, and they actually started a whole new group. But yeah, I'm definitely aware of the involvement between the Zetas and, you know, the American government basically training them to later be released on Mexico. And those guys were super brutal, man. The Zetas were something else. Well, I say were, they're still operating. They're just not what they used to be.
And people can check that on your channel. I'm just going to put the link in the description now. Now, earlier on, OG, you talked about the split in the Sinaloa cartel. Does that mean the power has gone down and the power of other cartels has gone up?
Most definitely. If Sinaloa was united, they'd be able to take out Jalisco and any other threat. But the fact they're too busy fighting each other, you know, is a big distraction, and it doesn't really let them confront their enemies.
Finn wants to know, isn't cartel life generally depressing, violent, and just like a living hell on earth? Why choose to live so close to this life and be so involved? Yeah, why do you do what you do, OG?
I do it. I feel like I'm paying for past sins, but also because there's no one else actually living here and bringing the truth, and especially in English. All the other channels I see that do this, they're not even in Mexico. They're in Spain or the United States, and I really feel to know what's going on here, you kind of have to live here. And maybe that's something I'm doing that no one else is doing, so I feel, you know, obligated to do it. I'm not really sure, but I definitely enjoy doing it. It's just a shame it has to be so dangerous that, you know, they kill journalists just for speaking on what's going on. You know, they want it to be a complete silence. But I know if no one spoke out about it like I do, the situation would be a lot worse.
How many podcast guests of yours have died?
I think it's like, I think it's four. I think it's four. Pretty sure.
How many family members of yours have died?
Close ones too. My brother-in-law and a cousin of mine as well.
We can get to some of that more, but we've got loads of questions coming in for you, OG. So, Xavier, does the US government endorse the Mexican cartel? Can I just say a little thing on that before you come in? So,
Yeah,
from my research, Xavier, the Mexican government works with one cartel while fighting another. So that keeps the Mexican government in compliance with the war on drugs, because they can arrest the rival cartels to the cartel that they're working with and say, look, we're fighting the war on drugs. But in the meantime, they're taking a shitload of money from one of the dominant cartels, and their military becomes an extension of that cartel's army, and that those forces are used to benefit that cartel. And then the American government just profits from it by arming every single side, fighting against each other. Is that an accurate perception?
I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Shaun. 100%.
And do you know which cartel the Mexican government is got close to it right now?
Well, traditionally, it's always been the Sinaloa cartel because they were the least violent. So they let, you know, as violence is bad for business, they were the best, you know, for making money. But what happened was the Jalisco organization offered more money, and that's why we see Mexico and the violence it has right now, because instead of the government picking the least violent cartel, they picked the cartel that was offering them the most money. And in this case, Jalisco was the most violent cartel. And that's why we see what's going on right now in Mexico, because Cartel Jalisco has simultaneously caused a war with every cartel in Mexico. They're literally fighting every cartel simultaneously as we speak, and that's why, you know, the numbers have gone up so far.
So Iju has asked, is Mencho's brother Abraham going to step up and fill more of that role?
I definitely think so. Because Mencho likes having his family members in top positions, and he's already very involved in the organization. So I definitely think Gaidu Craze is right. That would definitely be the logical decision for Mencho.
So PL, we've already answered this question about ending the war on drugs, take the money away from the cartels through legalization. So JC wants to know, what else does the cartel have at its disposal besides narcotics to acquire money? Have you heard of cooperation between them and the corrupt police before?
So every police officer in Mexico has to work with the cartels. That's, you know, not a question. It's called pato plomo here, as in you take my lead, as in my bullets, or you take my silver, you know, as in my money. And as far as acquiring money, you know, they have extortion is a big racket. Gasoline theft, which is known as washicol here, is a huge racket. And then just charging, you know, when I said extortion, I was talking kind of like the kidnapping type of extortion, but there's also what they call a quota, which means every business in said city has to pay them a certain amount of money. And that's another huge money maker. So there's several nefarious means, but there's also groups that don't do that, that refuse to take part in extortions, and they just work with narcotics. So not all cartels are like that, but unfortunately most of them are, as far as the extortion